You got your hair perms, you got your red dress on, screaming that second gear was such a turn on. And the fog foaming on my window tells me that the morning's here and you'll be gone before too long. Who taught you those new tricks? Damn, I shouldn't start that talk. But life is one big question when you're staring at the clock. And the answer's always waiting at the liquor store. 40 ounces of freedom, so I take that walk. And I know that I'm not going back. Not going back. Oh, God knows, not going back. Oh, I'm not going back. And you look so fine. When you lie, it just don't show. But I know which way the wind blows. A 40 ounce to freedom is the only chance I have to feel good, even though I feel bad. And I know that. Is that for an intro? I've been singing that song for a long time. There's one time I was driving. I had like 4 girls in my car. I'm not sure if there was any guys in there. And they were all talking. And I started singing Sublime. And they all got quiet. And to this day, I still wonder, were they thinking in their heads, oh my God, I gotta get it out of this car? Or were they just jamming? I was driving, so I couldn't really tell. How is everybody today? Hope everybody's good. Speaking of which, I think people really need to rewatch Super Jail every now and again to remind themselves what peak looks like. But you get serious. Why would you ever be mad? The only enemy you're responsible for facing is the bad version of yourself. Don't forget, my dear friends, ignorance is the most merciless of all conditions. And that's a fact, Jack. 2 strategies for living in America. Do something so valuable to society, the sick-in-the-head managers of our messy nation deem you necessary and spare nothing to save you, or never put yourself in harm's way. 2 good strategies for living, underline that word, in America. You can survive, but to live, you need to have some level of, separation between the bottom, instead of like coasting on the bottom, like grinding out every once in a while because you're hitting that. No, you gotta be smart about things. You gotta look ahead. To the heedful comes seldom harm. All anyone great has ever done was the best with what they're given. Many people know what it feels like to thank God for the compressor on their AC working on a hot day. We just need to practice that same gratitude for everything we have and are capable of doing better. Vaccine arguments, man. It's just expressing the media-propelled terrorism omnipresent in our modern American culture, just like the Iraq War. It feels just like the Iraq War. Just like the Iraq War, especially when they were counting how many 9/11s, the COVID ticker was calculating as. Funny enough, that's something that, like, when October 7th happened, and don't get me wrong, that was a real tragedy. That was a real terrorist attack. That was a real nightmare I watched. First-person body cam. I saw barracks filled with blood. But Israel came out and immediately said, this is like 100 9/11s because, you know, we got a population of 9 million, and since the U.S.'s population is 250 million, we got to do that calculation, and then we multiply by our dead, and that's how many 9/11s it actually is. Just insane justification for the fact that they genuinely think that their lives are worth more than anybody else. It's not, you know. Our lives aren't worth more than theirs. Their lives aren't worth more than ours. Their lives aren't worth more than Yemen's. The Yemen's lives aren't worth more than theirs. And across the board, it goes. Just like how anti-terrorism, quote, 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 uses national security to obscure the people's sight and cook up an unscopable phantasm, vaccine corporations use patent protection and lack of scientific wisdom to do the exact same thing. The most meaningful distinction between Christianity and Iron Age religion is that Christianity will look at someone suffering and go, "You poor creature, you've been through so much." Whereas many pagan cultures, Canaanite culture, even some Far Eastern cultures, will supersede the free will of all conscious beings. Now, Buddhists are pretty much exempt for that. That's why I almost always give them a pass in these sort of discussions. But going back to the most important part, asserting they were born under an inauspicious star or that they have bad blood. I think a lot of the violent assertion that the world is 7,000 years old comes from mostly those who wish to extract everything on God's green earth and alchemize it to sludge to burn in the mills. There's very, very little assumption of Earth's age by the great minds of the church. Hyper-literal interpretation of the Old Testament is the folly of sola scriptura Protestants. And no harm, no foul if you're just speculating. But the God wills it blasphemy? Blasphemy, mind you. The Deus Vult blasphemy? Cracked open. Pre-Masonic groups cracking open Christendom. The God wills it fallacy. The blasphemy is important to understand how people deny germ theory and think they can steal all the treasures of the earth that coexist to the great benefit of our progeny and posterity, instead of assuming the choices our ancestors made determine epigenetic switches and whether we are optimal to survive and thrive. It's entirely on God, good and bad. But here's the thing that a lot of American Protestants get right. God don't make mistakes. The worthy haves and the cursed have-nots is a Jewish and Calvinist assumption. That's not how God works. God had a covenant with Abraham, breaking away from the Canaanite religions, but they went back to the golden calf. And now there's no difference. Putting the Star of Metatron on their flag, worshiping Saturn. There's literally no difference between the Canaanites and a lot of the modern Israelis. I feel so bad for the Samaritans. Let's hope the Samaritans survive through all of this, you know? And naturally, all the innocent people in Israel. Because the Samaritans have been there the entire time. Ottomans, Mamluks, Sassanids, the entire time the Samaritans have persevered. And let's hope they continue to do so. A lot of theosophy is just doubling back on the scientific process of evolving religion, and that's why Catholicism keeps stacking and stacking and stacking. In fact, St. Isidore created punctuation that served the entire world. Such is the glory of religious evolution, the only evolution that actually really matters. But at the end of the day, you don't even need to use that word if it makes you uncomfortable. The free will exercised on earth as it is in heaven, conceptualized, moving forward with self-sacrifice and hard work contained in the traditional Catholic Church. I mean, the Big Bang Theory was created by a Catholic. Ain't that cool? I think that's kind of cool. Because it makes sense based on redshift, movement, mathematics. You can prove it mathematically. These quantum science quacks don't ever put up math on the board. Most of them don't even know the sort of math Einstein and his buddies were dealing with. They have no clue. And it's so easy for, like, young Masons to just excuse it all outright and then get people aggrieved saying that they're lying to you. Well, who the hell, who the hell in those spheres isn't subject to being radioactively burned by some lies, right? You got to be patient with people. You got to learn from the fool. You got to learn from the wise man and everybody in between. Otherwise, you're just not doing it right. A lot of theosophy is doubling back on scientific process of evolving religion and reaffirming the concepts like the firmament, the night sky our ancestors thought was some form of bubble intersecting the natural and the divine, is the real knowledge, and not, here's the big distinction, and not the incredible corpus of work brought about by people like the Sufi scholars and the Catholic theologians. But those people, those theosophists, are the same people who made mustard gas and started trench warfare and started the world wars. Those are the exact same people. And they laughed all the way to the bank. Thank God Trump has really taken it to the actual global power structure. Thank God. Thank God. I didn't even care much about our deficit or debt. I just care the fact that he is making it harder for evil people to do evil things easily. Oh, hate me if you want. You'll see eventually. You'll see what I mean eventually. Pretty sure on some of these things, I give myself like an 85% when I'm critical of myself. I give myself like an 85% on my guesses. Not perfect. Not an A, not an A plus, but I get like a mid B, not a B minus, not a B plus, you know. And I can get better. It also gives me space and reason to get better. By the time I'm like hitting mid A territory, my brain's just going to be so hyperactive. Oh, Lord, I wonder if I could take that. Anyways. You don't have to destroy the present to respect the past. Japan has Neolithic practices as well as space-age technology. And they're the single most impressive country in the world. Straight up. You know, Lord of the Rings is absolutely shot through with anthroposophy and theosophy, but it's done in an honest, respectful way, separating fact from fiction. You ever see the picture of the wizard guy crawling out of the firmament? It's got like a bunch of like nature and stuff on the inside and a bunch of stars on the outside, and he's like passing through, like crawling through, you know. It's more of a metaphor for perception. But that is called something around the Silmarillion. Pretty sure that's what that's called. And that is where Tolkien got the inspiration for the Silmarillion. If you didn't know, I didn't read that anywhere. It just popped into my head randomly. It actually popped into my head when I was showing my friend the soy Marillion. And there was a bunch of soy jacks all over the place. Oh. I like Warhammer 40k orcs more, though. I'm sorry. There's so many like lore freaks that try to paint them as like horrible, evil creatures, which is like people are painting the orcs from Lord of the Rings is like more evil than they are, and like anti-orc propaganda is getting on my nerves because orcs are thinking creatures too, and they also have hopes and dreams and chances to change. And the worst part about Lord of the Rings is that it anthroposophically locks orcs into their path. Like there are no orcs, not a single one of them that has freebooted. Speaking of freebooters, there's a Prop a Crumpin on Vox in the Void, a multi-part story about a rogue trader and his administrative buddy and a gigantic orc. And they're all friends and they do cool stuff and it's awesome. It's fun. It's really fun. You know, nothing was worse for the respect of the past than photography and cinematography. The entire modern zeitgeist is deeply presumptive of a lifeless black and white and poor sepia past. You know, tribal people were really onto something with the whole camera steal your soul bit. They were cooking with that one. Don't worry too much, though. God's will and God's law is such that the souls unfortunate in this life turn out to be the strongest and most exalted among us. Demons in the IDF concentration camps are experimenting with breaking willpower and extreme torture, but God's law is stronger than their evil and their shredded covenant. Tariffing Israel, but not Russia? So you're saying Trump is the greatest president in our lifetime? Let's hope so. Let's hope so. I write up some stuff out of thin air like, it appears my suspicions that Trump's seemingly monstrous strategy, potentially being the most anti-industrialist, pro-nationalist thing any president has done since Carter and the Volcker shock, was indeed well-founded. When I go to speak, I'm like, my brain hurts! Hello? Noel was mean to me! It is what it is, though, man. Nothing is 2D, so it's nearly impossible for two things to ever be one-to-one, right? Spent a lot of time writing, and I did not spend a lot of time in my life speaking. It is what it is, you know. Maybe over time I'll get better. I feel myself sharpening that aspect through this. And thank y'all for sticking around. I appreciate you. I really, really do appreciate you guys. I gotta dial back on something. I gotta correct the record. DeSantis being Randy Fine's friend? Not true. Just yesterday, he was ripping him a new one. Apparently, everybody hates this Randy Fine guy. The guy that I said yesterday was friends with DeSantis because they have some photographs together. Who was on X, jacking off over, sorry, that's disgusting, it is disgusting, jacking off over Palestinian babies dead, buried in rubble. That guy is an evil creep, and he does a lot more to damage Israel than he does to help it. So you just gotta respect the process, respect God's will and God's law, and keep calm, carry on. But, you know, seriously, I gotta pull that one back. DeSantis was ripping him a new one the other day. Good on ya. You know, I gotta go check that bill on child labor. I'm pretty sure it did pass, and that's evil. That's evil. We've already experimented with that here, and they get sick, they cut their fingers off, they can't get school properly because they're exhausted. It's evil. And we're bringing that here. We're not moving backwards, we're moving forwards into that dystopian future, and that's just wrong. But he was actually, I saw for sure, can confirm, he was pushing that bill through the Florida Senate. Is what it is, you know. J.D. Vance strikes me as a true orange who hates European bureaucracy because he's Scotch-Irish, even though he converted 4 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. 4 years ago, I think. 8 years ago? To Catholicism. But I'd be very interested in finding out what type of Catholicism. Sedevacantism, SSPX, which is the middle ground, or Novus Ordo, in which case you're not a Catholic. You're not a Catholic. Sorry. If that offends you, it's true. I don't mean to offend you. I'm not trying to troll. But if you are a Novus Ordo Catholic, as in, you know, Paul VI, John the 23rd, John Paul II, Francis, I reserve exemption for Benedict XVI. He was a maverick in that lineup, and you're aware of the pedophilia scandals. That is not a one-off thing. That is a deliberate child trafficking. The Bank of St. Peter being used to help fund black market circulation from the heroin trade and from the human bodies trade, that's genuinely evil. Like, seriously, you gotta start examining that and doing a little bit of research into that, please, if you are a Novus Ordo Catholic. Did you know our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is openly gay? Also, his career got started at the Soros Fund Management. Yes, that Soros. Oh, man. When people like that whine about Putin, though, I just end up liking him more. So, you always gotta hope that in the long term, things will work out okay. All right, everybody. Cheers.